Hey, welcome into Four Down Territory. I'm Kyle Madson, the managing editor at the Niners Wire. Joining me is Doug Farrar, the managing editor of Touchdown Wire. Really excited to get going, and let's dive into, I think, the most interesting story of this upcoming league year, and that's Lamar Jackson. Not only did the Ravens place the non-exclusive franchise tag on him, but then almost every team that might be interested or need a Lamar Jackson came out and said, like, yeah, we're not interested. Not going to do it, not going to be in the mix, which seems kind of wild. So is this just the typical kind of smokescreen gamesmanship to you, or are we looking at something that rises to the level of collusion from these NFL owners?
As they say, Kyle, my good friend, something is fishy in Denmark. Regarding collusion, the dictionary definition thereof is a deceitful agreement or secret cooperation between two or more parties to limit open competition. It is naive to assume that the NFL is not above it. From 1934 through 1945, the NFL's owners colluded to ensure that no player of color would play for any team. Owners colluded for decades to prevent open free agency. Owners in the league colluded to prevent the honest data and information regarding head trauma for decades. NFL teams colluded to create an artificial salary cap in the uncapped lockout year of 2020. And then there's the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, of which you, as a Bay Area guy, are innately familiar. So you could say that pro football has been built to a degree on collusion throughout its history. Here's what we know. The Cleveland Browns' decision to give Deshaun Watson a fully guaranteed 5-year, $230 million contract, which they're already trying to kick down the road with the restructure this year, was met with horror among the NFL's other owners, not because of the things Watson did off the field, but for the horrifying precedent it set. Lamar Jackson has publicly expressed serious interest in a similar contract. I think there is a very real possibility that the NFL has stepped into the fray and simply insisted that this kind of guaranteed contract lasting more than 1 or 2 years, the Kirk Cousins thing, isn't going to happen. Not for Lamar Jackson and not for anybody. They're going to put this thing back in the box and put it in the river and, no more of this. And to assume that there isn't collusion just because collusion is bad is, as I said, naive, given the league's history. I'd be more inclined to believe that it is so than it is not when I take that history into account. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I get, like, if somebody wants to, I don't know why you would necessarily, but wants to step in front of the NFL owners here and say, well, of course you're going to come out and say that you're not going to be interested because you don't want to tip your hand in free agency. You don't want to tip your hand in the draft. You don't want to drive up the price of a potential trade if that's going to go down. So I get why you'd come at it from that angle, but everything you just laid out, this wasn't a team saying like, yeah, we're going to explore all options or we're keeping an open mind or all that usual kind of smokescreen speak. This was in succession, like 6 teams that could use Lamar Jackson. They came out and said, not interested, not doing it, not even going to get involved. And
not going to talk to him. It was, like you said, it wasn't, we're exploring that's usual. Or one team might say, now we're good. Right. The Panthers, you can now understand with the trade up to number 1. Right. They're going to get their guy, who I think is CJ Stroud. But to sit there and say, oh yeah, nope, forget it. That's that's where it gets weird.
Yeah, and I think the big thing here is this has nothing to even do, like, the discussion to me is not about Lamar Jackson as a quarterback, right? It's not like, what does he offer? Do you have to build your team around this? Do you have to have this kind of coach or this type of offensive line or whatever it is? I don't even think it's about that. It's all about the stuff you mentioned with that contract. The league is going to do everything they possibly can to ensure that this is not a precedent, that the Deshaun Watson thing is an outlier and does not become a precedent moving forward. And I think based on everything you just laid out, we know that they're going to do everything up to and including collusion. So that's not a shock to me at all that they would go that far.
And I think, the thing about collusion is in any business, any endeavor, it's very hard to prove unless you're an idiot like John Gruden. You're dumb enough to send emails to Bruce Allen. Right. Hey, I'm a racist, homophobic monster. Just, unless you're, stupid enough to leave a quote unquote paper trail. Right. Collusion with intent, a cabal of individuals getting together to artificially deflate a market for a person or an industry, very hard to prove. The NFL knows this. It's been caught on collusion a couple times. So were that to be the case, and I think it is, and I don't think it would be a shock to anybody, Well, what does Lamar Jackson do? He doesn't even have an agent. What is he going to do? Sue the NFL? Yeah, good luck with that. So I think the NFL is colluding. I think the NFL will get away with it. And I think Lamar Jackson will have to, he'll either play on this non-exclusive tag this year, or he'll be traded and he'll get a deal that is in the neighborhood of what he wants because he's a former MVP. He's
Right.
young. He's got a bright future. But, as you said, it's not about Lamar Jackson, the quarterback. Is he good or bad? Can he win a Super Bowl?
Right.
Can he win from the pocket? Whatever. Nothing to do with that. It's what the NFL is setting up for every player from Lamar Jackson on.
Right.
That's the real story.
Right. And I don't think that this is ending anytime soon. Not this free agency period, and maybe as you said, not even the next one. But we're taping this at the start of the NFL's legal tampering period, the legal negotiating window, whatever you want to call it. So let's talk some free agency. What hypothetical player team pairing combo do you find the most interesting?
I've heard it called pre-agency today, which I like.
That's good. That's strong. Pre-agency.
I have to go look and say who said it on Twitter, so I'll credit them in the list. Go that pre-agency. I like that because of course tampering is illegal and it never happens in any other business. Sure.
No, never.
Getting back to player team fit, new team where I had the Jacksonville Jaguars, Kyle, and I had a team that finished 9-8 and made it to the divisional round of the playoffs despite a defense that finished 30th in DVOA against the pass. I would be going all out for former Panthers, Giants, and Eagles cornerback James Bradbury. We all remember Bradbury's defensive holding call that set up the Chiefs' game-winning field goal in Super Bowl 57, but Bradbury was one of the NFL's best cornerbacks last season, and including in that game. Per Pro Football Focus, he allowed 46 catches on 96 targets for 489 yards, 159 yards after the catch, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 12 pass breakups, and an opponent quarterback rating of 51.8. And by the way, he only had 3 penalties all season. Bradbury is a scheme versatile cornerback who would make that defense all kinds of better right away, and their defense desperately needs it.
So when the Eagles got James Bradbury from the Giants, it was one of those moves that was like the Eagles just got it. They just let him go to the Eagles, and that was fine. No other team was involved in this. And then sure enough, he winds up being, a really good player for a team that went to the Super Bowl. I love the idea of him in Jacksonville because I'm just on the hype train with Jacksonville. You get a player like James Bradbury in that defense. I think it really shifts the way we view Jacksonville, not just in a bad AFC South, but in the AFC kind of in general, because I think this is a year where we're going to start to look at Trevor Lawrence with the Joe Burrows, with the Patrick Mahomes, with the Josh Allens. And I think we're going to kind of put him in that realm. So I love the idea of them adding a player of Bradbury's quality to that defense. I'm going to stick with something I know here because Jimmy Garoppolo has just dominated my life since the Niners acquired him in 2017. I can't get rid of the guy. Dude, it's brutal. I just can't. And last year was like, yes, he's gone. And then he's back again. But this year, I think this is the time he's out the door. Kyle Shanahan said as much. John Lynch has said as much.
Oh, yeah.
And I love the idea of him landing with the Raiders because the fascinating thing for me with Jimmy Garoppolo, and in talking to friends of mine who are not Niner fans, they have this same question. It's like, how good is he? Because if you just look at the raw numbers with the Niners, he's very good. Like the yards per attempt and his efficiency, and he turns it over a little bit, but not a ton. But I would love to see him with a team like the Raiders. They got Devontae Adams, and it's Darren Waller, and it's Hunter Renfrow, and it's Josh Jacobs. But they don't have a defense that's going to be elite. Even with a couple of moves in free agency, I don't think that group's going to get to the level that the Niners have been at in 2019 or even 2021 or 2022. So can he take an offense with weapons and elevate it above the level that its defense is going to need it to play? And can they win games? Can he survive in an environment that's not Kyle Shanahan? Can he survive in an environment where he's facing Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Russell Wilson, now paired with Sean Payton? Like, that's going to be a brutal division. And if Jimmy Garoppolo is this like really independently good, like in a vacuum quarterback, we're going to learn that with the Raiders. And I don't think we'd necessarily learn that as much anywhere else. So I would love to see him land in Vegas. I think his whole persona and just his look and his vibe, I think fits in Sin City really well. So that's the one. If Garoppolo or when Garoppolo leaves, that's the spot I'm hoping he lands.
Well, if they want to redo Ocean's 11, they got their George Clooney right there. Boom. Yeah, I've done a lot of tape study of Garoppolo over the years, and he never got the chance in New England. And the thing with San Francisco is when you're Kyle Shanahan's quarterback, and it's why I find the Trey Lance thing so fascinating, because Lance is not like this. He is going to make plays off script. Kyle has, and this, has historically preferred a quarterback. You can do a little bit of your own stuff, but you really have to color inside the lines of the playbook. And Garoppolo has been a perfectly functional quarterback in that regard. As far as the guy who's going to elevate anything, I haven't seen it. So if he goes back with Josh McDaniels, with whom he is very familiar, and he's got that receiver group, decent enough offensive line. Josh Jacobs is, to me, the best running back in the NFL right now. I mean, I don't know why people aren't saying that more, because he did everything. It's not like he has to transcend anything for that offense to be great. The defense is another story. And, that's when you're down 14-0 early because you're playing the Bills or the Chiefs and your defense just kind of, well, for lack of a better word, stinks. What do you do then? I think you give the ball to Josh Jacobs a lot. Garoppolo to me is not a transcender. He is not a guy who's going to come in and make your offense better unless your quarterback is just really, really bad. And what you need to do is get up to average. I think with Garoppolo, that's where he is, average to a little above average, which is fine. If, you can win a Super Bowl if you have a great defense with a quarterback like that. I just don't think he's that guy, but that doesn't mean he's bad. It doesn't mean is he improving over Derek Carr? Maybe not. And that's where things get really weird for the Raiders. That's where the things get really weird for the Raiders. If that deal were to be made, and it very well could happen, where he comes in and Raiders fans used to Derek Carr are seeing Jimmy G try and throw over the middle, which has always been a problem for him. It's like, the guy we used to have that you were so desperate to get rid of was better than this chucklehead.
Jimmy's not going to do, though? He's not going to throw it away on 4th down with the game on the line. He might throw it. He might throw it into a linebacker's chest or take a sack, but he's not going to throw it into the dirt.
He's not going to. He's a very risk-averse guy. He's going to get sacked,
right?
Or he'll do like the helium heave up in the air, like in the NFC Championship game 2 years ago. It's a decent option, but I guess my question there would be, as Ricky Waters once said, for what? Is he better than Derek Carr? I don't think he is. So I think that would be a mistake for the Raiders, but that's their mistake to make.
Yeah, bridge quarterback option for sure. Yes, so let's look at this the other way now. Which free agent loss? I think which free agent loss would a team feel the most? And
well, yeah, go ahead.
And just kind of the free agent that you're like, that team needs to bring that guy back.
Well, we'll go with the current NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles, who have kind of the last one out the door, turn out the lights thing with their defensive free agents right now. It's bad.
Yeah.
Ouch. But I'll go with Javon Hargrave, who is the number one player on Touchdown Wire's free agency rankings list. Philadelphia got him on a 3-year, $39 million deal in 2020, which is the typical Howie Roseman larceny. Last season, Hargrave had 12 sacks, 6 quarterback hits, 48 quarterback hurries, 36 stops. Remember, he is playing inside and getting double teamed a lot because, their line was great, but it was also a lot of 5-man fronts and different schematic things. Hargrave's effect on the Eagles, though, it went beyond his own stats. It's how the Eagles defense changed when he wasn't on the field. Per Sports Info Solutions, and I know on-off splits, some people are going to laugh at this, but on-off splits can tell you some things. Hargrave was on the field for 649 snaps, off the field for 363 snaps. When he was on the field, the Eagles' pressure rate went from 33.3% to 37.8%. Sack rate went from 8.4 to 12. Yards per attempt allowed went from 5.4 to 4.7. Opponent rushing touchdown rate went from 5.1% to 3.4%. You could argue that Hargrave has as massive an effect as any defensive tackle in the league right now. And if the Eagles lose him, he is not so easily replaceable, especially when, we're already talking about maybe TJ Edwards to the Bears. They got, they're trying to get Gardner Johnson back. They're going to lose Bradbury. Kaiser White, who's a really underrated linebacker. We'll talk about another former Chargers underrated linebacker here in a minute. They got a lot to get going. I think Hargrave will price himself out of coming back to Philly, and that's going to, they have 2 first-round picks, so that helps. it's going to be a real problem for them. Kyle, what about you?
What if I told you he signed a 4-year, $80 million deal with $40 million guaranteed with the Niners, or agreed to that deal?
I would say good for you, Niners.
Yeah, I think that's a nice addition for them for sure.
Yeah.
So I was actually going to say Hargrave. I think he's an excellent player. Everything you just laid out was terrific. The one I'm looking at though is Jesse Bates, the Bengals safety. I was a huge fan of him out of Wake Forest in 2018. I think he's just a stellar player. Like, you can line him up anywhere. And when you remove a chess piece like that, who's not only productive in coverage and stopping the run, one of the best run stopping safeties in the league, but when you take that piece out, I think Lou Anarumo does a great job as their defensive coordinator. But when you take a chess piece like that out, you can line up in the box, you can line him up deep, you can line him up in the slot. I mean, you can do whatever you want. When you remove that, I just think it makes it a little bit harder to be as versatile and as multiple on defense. So I think the Bengals, I don't think they're going to pay him. I don't know if they necessarily want to, but they're going to miss him. They're going to miss him a lot. When
they could also lose Von Bell in free agency.
Yeah,
so man. Double trouble.
Yeah, it's a tough pairing to lose with in the back end of a defense. All right, so we've talked about the big names in free agency. Let's get to some of the more under the radar names. Who's the under the radar free agent that we're going to be looking at maybe in January and going, man, that I didn't even notice that signing, and it's been huge for that team?
I will go with the guy who really replaced the aforementioned Kazir White with the Chargers. That's Drew Tranquill, one of the more interesting players in this free agent class. 4th round pick out of Notre Dame in 2018. He really didn't find a full-time starting role until last season. But when White left for the Eagles, Tranquill became the main man in the middle of Brandon Staley's defense. You know how that is. Light box, a lot of nickel, 2 linebackers. Those guys have to do everything, and he really did. 5 sacks, 15 total pressures, 105 tackles, 53 stops, and he's proven able to cover speed tight ends up the seam. And he had one play I was watching this last week where he did something not a lot of defenders were able to get away with. He beat Tyreek Hill up at the line of scrimmage and actually covered him through the route, came up with a near interception. That's a linebacker doing that, guys. So, yeah. I say you give this guy $10 million a year, you put him in the middle of your defense, and that's one thing you don't have to worry about for the next 3 or 4 years.
So I was going to pander to you here, and I was going to say Poona Ford. The Seahawks defense. Poona Ford's great. He's a blast to watch. But I'm going to go with Raiders tight end Foster Moreau. So he's been in Darren Waller's shadow the last few years, but he's still 91 catches, about 1,100 yards, 12 touchdowns. Still been a really effective tight end. In the last 2 years, in the 13 games without Waller in the lineup, he has 41 catches, 490 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's got a really good athletic profile. I just think he's kind of a breakout candidate waiting to happen. And I don't even think he's going to get like tight end 1 type of money. So I think he's going to be a really, really good player for whatever team lands him.
Well, here's the thing, and the NFL is a copycat league, and I think I brought this up with Luke Easterling on last week's Fort on Territory. Copycat league, who just won the Super Bowl? Chiefs. Who ran the most 2 and 3 tight end sets in the NFL last year? Chiefs. The league is going to go that way. And a guy like Moreau, he may not get TE1 money, but he may have TE1/TE1A 2A production in that kind of system. Maybe the Chiefs sign him. Who knows? They would be familiar with him, playing him twice a year. So to say that with tight ends the way they're being utilized in the NFL now, and it's a great tight end class in the draft, which could further it's the best tight end class in like the last decade. So a guy like Moreau, who isn't an obvious, unless you're Travis Kelce, you might get your price driven down by the draft. Yeah. But yeah, he's a good player, and you put him in the right system, and he could really eat. Yeah.
All right, everybody, that's our show for today. Thank you for stopping by 4 Down Territory. Make sure to check out Doug at touchdownwire.com. You can read my stuff at ninerswire.com, and we will be back with you next week. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.